Welcome back to Walking Away from Arcadia. We're going to do a short mini-sode today. I was recently at Gen Con. I ran several games there, including a Changeling game. And there were some announcements that came out from Onyx Path and White Wolf about the future of the World of Darkness and the projects that they have upcoming. And there was specifically some Changeling news. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that Changeling news with Simon. And due to a request from a listener, I did want to talk a little bit about how the game that I ran went and how that went down, just in case anybody was curious. It was kind of a wacky, psychotic little game. I think I'm going to start out with the news. The big Changeling news that landed is they announced a Changeling the Dreaming 20th Anniversary Player's Guide. They listed some of the things that'll be in the Player's Guide. It's going to be a closer inspection of the magic systems, some more information about the Kiths, Kithane Society, those sorts of things. It was all pretty high level, fairly generic, the kinds of things you'd expect in a Player's Guide. For me, I was almost more excited just about the fact that this is the first confirmation we've had since White Wolf really got up and running at full speed that they are going to continue to greenlight new 20th anniversary texts, which means that we will probably get a full Changeling 20th line. They also confirmed in the same panel where they talked about the Changeling Player's Guide that White Wolf is going to take a little while with each of their editions, and Onyx Path will be allowed to keep doing 20th anniversary books, basically up to the point that they're ready to release their new edition of whatever line it is. This specifically came up in relation to Mage because Mage has a very long list of announced books that were put up before the Paradox acquisition of White Wolf. And they said, Onyx Path will basically be able to just continue to release that whole line, but they weren't sure if they'd get them all out before they did Mage 5th. Basically confirms that's what they're doing with all the games, which means beyond the Player's Guide, we're likely to see several more things from Changeling, which is cool. That's exciting to have that confirmation. And there was someone from White Wolf on the panel sort of confirming things. It had Onyx Path crew and White Wolf, so that was cool. So Simon, what are your thoughts on Changeling Player's Guide? All things that didn't quite get into the 20th, but maybe not one core major theme for the book.
Well, my immediate question about that is the first edition player's guide introduced the Nunahi. Is there going to be anything weird in this one?
That's a good question. I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily expect anything super new. That was something that came up while they were talking about Vampire in the World of Darkness panel is, they've released a whole bunch of stuff for Vampire 20th. It's hands down the longest line, also the longest running. And the line developer for Vampire was there, Eddie Webb, and he made the comment that they'd kind of reached the edge of what they can do without just creating brand new content. And that should really be White Wolf doing that. And so it made sense to move to Vampire 5th and for White Wolf to take that back. They definitely did some new stuff in Changeling 20th, but most of that new stuff was replacing things that didn't make any sense, kind of like the Dauntain, in terms of just straight up brand new out of nowhere. The closest we get to that is new Thelaine Kith, but again, that was kind of completing a thought that was started, as opposed to here's a brand new thing, like introducing the Orisha as a family of changelings would be kind of a brand new thing. So, I don't know, it seems out of line with the mission of the 20ths. At the same time, man, there's a whole lot of brand new stuff that's been announced in Book of Oblivion. New Dark Arcanoi, new casts of Spectres. So I don't know, it's not out of the question, but I don't know that I'd hold my breath and expect it.
Well, keeping in line with the old player's guide, getting some revision on the Nunahi wouldn't be creating anything new either.
It would not. I think that's probably a lot more likely. The biggest thing I want from the player's guide is for them to complete some of their incomplete thoughts. I really like C20, aside from a couple specific critiques that have come up in previous episodes. Overall, I think it's a massive improvement for the line, but there are some incomplete thoughts there. The Ghislaine being at the top of that list. I wouldn't mind if they completed those thoughts.
Yeah, taking the opportunity to fill in some of the blanks with the Adhene, particularly the Thelaine, the Galain, wouldn't go badly. and it would look a little bit less odd in the player's guide than some of the stuff that did end up in the first edition player's guide. Like, there was an appendix in there, I think, that had like, oh, and we forgot this art.
Oh no, it was an agenda. They forgot an entire agenda for the Daunting from the Autumn People book.
Good
Yeah,
job.
that was a little awkward. The other thing, and this isn't broad news, but one of the players at my C20 session was one of the writers for C20, and he didn't give like hardcore specific news. But, I brought up my feelings on the Ghislaine and the Nunnehi and the Menehune. We were chatting a little bit, and he said that, he was one of the writers for the Freeholds book as well, which is upcoming. And he said that, the center of the book is still the Cathane. It absolutely has to be. But they did put some work into including the Ghislaine in that. Now, he said the Ghislaine. I don't know exactly what that means. I'm guessing he means the Nunnehi Menehune because we put specific effort into making sure the Gilly Do were there would be a little weird. So, I mean, that's super soft and not in any way, official or particularly well thought out. It was just banter. But I am glad to hear that there's at least some effort to incorporate some of those groups into other books because I actually really love the original write up for the Nunnehi. It's not perfect. There are some problems with it, but it's better than a lot of what White Wolf was doing at the time with non white centered content, but then they never really got folded into other stories. Even Rage Across Appalachia that I read recently, they're surprisingly absent. And it specifically says in the player's guide they have a relationship with werewolves, and the Cathane kind of don't. And the Cathane are more of a presence there than the Nunnehi. And I'm like, for the werewolf changeling crossover, really? We're doing this? What? So I have a little bit of hope that maybe we're not going to see so much of that as the 20th line that we now know we're getting progresses.
The old Freeholds and Glens book was really not my thing. Not a huge fan of specific setting books, and that's kind of what that one was. At the same time, the thing that would make it a little bit more interesting to me would be to go outside of the Cathane Society and, bring in some examples like this is what, a northeastern Nunnehi calling it a freehold seems weird, but calling it a lodge also seems weird. But what a northwestern Native American freehold thing looks like. Does it have a balefire? Is that weird?
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm hoping for. I also get the feeling, and this is a little bit of extrapolation from other things that the lead developer for Changeling has done recently. I get the feeling it won't be a here are some freeholds book. I get the feeling it's going to be more here are instructions for the sorts of things you would use to build a freehold or a glen, or what does it look like for a Nunnehi freehold? What are some of the things you'd want to include there? I get the feeling that's the way he wants to go with that. And the reason I say that is the other big game he's released in the last year or two is Beast the Primordial. And they didn't do a quick start. They did something they called a quick start originally, and then they moved to the jumpstart terminology. But it wasn't what a quick start normally is, where here are some characters, here's a scenario, here are some basic rules. It was here's a breakdown on how to build an entire chronicle for Beast. And we're going to jumpstart that process for you by giving you some guidance. And Beast specifically needs that more than other games that I've read. They did a normal quick start for Changeling, but just the fact that I've seen Matt McFarland, who's the lead developer, lead other lines that sort of went that direction of here's guidance and tools to build, not, here's a freeholds book with 6 freeholds in it. I'm hoping it's more of that, guidelines, instructions for construction as opposed to here are some examples. Because again, if it's a series of examples, I'll get my backer PDF, I'll look at it, and I probably won't buy a copy. If it's a guide on how to construct a freehold and what makes a good freehold and the pieces of that, I think I'll probably buy a copy.
Yeah, that's definitely more interesting to me than here's some setting information.
Yeah, I mean, The other thing that it brings up, and just taking the opportunity to think about it a little more now that we think it's coming, what other books would you like to come out of the 20th? Like the line of 20th?
Oh, that's. How about 5 million she books? That'd be great.
We're going to get a book of houses. I'm just going to take a deep breath and accept that that is word count that is devoted because I know it's going to happen, but I'm just going to, just one. Just one is good enough. One with
Oh,
all 14 houses, it's fine.
oh, I had this thought earlier today, or maybe yesterday, because we were having that ongoing argument about what the mists are, and I was thinking about House Dannon because they have that backwards mists thing,
I know, I love
and
that. I love that so much.
like what were they? How were they absent from Earth if they weren't just kind of hanging out in the dreaming the whole time anyway?
Yeah. I
And what if they're like the active hand of the mists in the real world? They pop out every once in a while and go, "Oh, wait, nope, here's a book about the Fae. Let's get some crayons."
That's interesting. I mean, there's a little snippet in C20 that's basically like, oh no, even the writings of the Fae are distorted and changed, and you have to look at them as scans. But the idea that sometimes you need some physical intervention, that makes the Danon super interesting to me. And I already like them more than most of the houses, but
I mean, they're kind of interesting as pathfinders, but I mean, there's an art for that already.
there is. I mean, there's an art for it. I like them as a story hook. I like them as weird and out of place and confused by the world around them in a way the other she aren't. The whole you randomly forget the people you know and the world that now you're stuck in, I think that's an interesting space to explore. But that little hook of maybe they're the hand of the mists, and maybe well, not maybe, they probably don't even know it. I
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of really fun space there. I tend to want to do somewhat less traditional changeling games, but that's a hook that has a lot of space in a very traditional set of changeling stories that I think could still engage me a lot.
Mm-hmm. Because I was thinking about that and I was like, well, there's House I Lunid, where they're like, we're into secrets, but they're into revealing secrets and learning secrets. And you have the
Yes.
Slua, who don't reveal them so much, but they're still into knowing them. And you've got the Satyrs, who are scholars, and they don't shut up. And I just kind of went down the list. I was like, everybody who's actually into secrets, apart from the Slua, wouldn't destroy them.
But maybe Danon would. Yeah, I like that. I would love to see. Well, and just going back to, the announcements from Gen Con and what that kind of opens up to speculate, I think Danon needs a full write up. They have this blurb. The blurb
Mm-hmm.
is cool, like in terms of just being story hook to word count ratio. I think it's super rich, but it's still a blurb. Giving them a full chapter in a house's book would be nice. I think we can just skip over the fact that anyone who's listened to the sound of our voice knows we want a Ghislaine book really badly. That kind of goes without saying. I want a book that just totally centers the stories on the Nunahi and the Menehune, and the Cathain are at best occasional support cast. Just one book. I just want one book like that. It would be great.
Yeah, getting an update for the ideas that came out in Fool's Luck would be good because, in the context of second edition, Fool's Luck was here's the backstory with the war in Concordia. And then there was, if I'm remembering right, there was a pretty big section that was so here's where we're at today. The Parliament of Dreams isn't meeting, the High King is missing, everything is chaos. That's not the way it is as of C20. And getting. I know I just said that I don't like settings books, but this isn't really like, here's a freehold, here are the people in the freehold. This is. So, what does the political landscape look like? What kind of person emerges as a power player?
Yeah, and this gets back to something else I heard people bantering about. This is in no way official, but just, now that okay, we're probably going to get new books, and realistically, it's going to take them a few years to get to Changeling 4, whatever they end up calling Wraith and Changeling because they aren't 5th editions, is the idea of a Kingdoms book. Lots of people want it. I get the feeling even a lot of writers want to work on it. But a Kingdoms book could very easily turn into a setting book. Like, here's a setting, here's this kingdom, here's that kingdom, whatever. If they do a Kingdoms book more like the sort of domains in the Dark Ages companion, the Dark Ages 20th companion, and it's all about the history and it's all about the story, and there's, apocrypha and weird rumors, and they get into those politics. I think you could really weave in some of what you're talking about to that book. Given the format of the 20ths and that they do kind of big, broad topic books, they don't tend to do the really smaller books. I think Fool's Luck, I don't know that it could be standalone. I could be proven wrong. We could get a big, meaty commoners book, and I would not complain. But I feel like weaving that into a Kingdoms book that focuses much more on history and narrative and the political interconnections between the kingdoms could be really cool.
Oh, kingdoms. Fixing the kingdoms would be great, but they're never going to do that.
Like, I mean, I don't know. A lot of really messy old things have been fixed over the life of Vampire 20th, so I'd like to think we'll get some of that for Changeling.
Still, like, having basically the whole Midwest be one kingdom is bizarre to me.
I do not disagree with you on that point. That level of fixing the kingdoms, I don't think we're going to get. That you're right about that.
It's
We
just a bit
might
of
get
a.
a kingdoms book that's developed in a more interesting way. I would not mind something that took everything good about Kingdom of Willows and tried to do that for all the kingdoms, even if the boundaries that are on the map are a little weird.
Doing an outside of America politics and setting in broad strokes book would be useful too.
Yeah, I agree. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about, and this will probably be pretty brief, and it was due to someone asking about it, is giving a little bit of a breakdown of how my Changeling 20th session went. It was an interregnum game. It was set during 1925 in Chicago. And I've run this scenario once before, and it went very differently. I'd like to subtitle this session Vampires Think They're Monstrous, and That's Kind of Adorable. My players were a special kind of awful. The player makeup I ended up with was it's set in Uptown in Chicago. And for people who don't know, the largest cinema palace in the world at the time it was built, the Uptown Theater, opened in 1925, and it was set on the night before and the day of the opening of this theater. This particular version of the story stuck to the night before. They didn't get around to day of because they're monsters and they destroyed my story in really entertaining, wonderful ways, but still. And so I ended up with a red cap Northside Ganger. The Northside Gang was commonly known as the Irish Gang. It really wasn't the Irish Gang. There were a fair number of Irish gangers in it. There were also a fair number of Polish gangers and other groups. It was very mixed. A couple high ranking individuals that are famously known are Irish, and so it got that reputation, but it's not a good one. Still, Changeling, con game, I ran with it, and I had that gang be full of red caps because dreams of domination and bathtub hooch and all the other weird appetites that they have. And then there was one red cap in our group, a bunch of other red caps that were antagonists. There was an Ishu in our group, a Puka. The Puka was based on a historic figure, as was the Ishu. And then we had a troll. And the whole idea is it's the night before this big opening, lots of glamour, and something weird is
That poor
happening.
troll.
Oh my god, the troll was fantastic. We did not have the Skaha, and I'm gonna just take this opportunity to apologize for all the times that Simon and I have said Skathak. I recently discovered it's pronounced Skaha. I didn't know that. French pronunciation, man, it's a little weird. So I'll just throw that out there. I had a Skaha template written. No one played that. It did get played the last time I ran this. And I had a Satyr template written that was the satyr girlfriend of my red cap ganger. You can imagine how wonderfully unseelie she is, but no one has played that template either time. So yeah, Redcap, Ishu, Puka, and Troll. And just to open up, the Boggin who runs all of Uptown, who makes prodigious use of contracts to keep everyone in place, especially on Al Capone. Al Capone is sort of central to the workings of this, and it's wrapped up in some history of Al Capone and how he behaved very differently in the Green Mill and in Uptown, and the war didn't go there because everybody wanted to have a good time, and you had to have somewhere to retreat to, or else why even fight for all this power? And I made it sort of that, but more the fairies of Uptown kept him enchanted and docile and addicted to glamour because it kept him from shooting them all up. So this theater is opening, and everybody with Susse in the city has been seeing terrible premonitions, and so the Boggin that leads everything comes up to the Motley, and the troll is his bodyguard. He trusts this Motley, and he says, "You need to figure out what's going on." It's standard quest ending because one shot con game. So they go investigating, and they find out, kind of Northside gangers, and they're tracking these two red caps. And this is where things go really sideways, and just like sideways. They're tracking these two red caps, and then they all fail their stealth rolls. Like all four of them failed stealth rolls. And the red caps see them and run into an alley to try and ambush them. They thankfully notice. Three of them are like, "We're gonna get a drop on the red caps." The issue, the in theory Sealy issue, says, "Are there any cops around?" I'm like, "You can roll to see if there are any cops, sure." And I rolled to see, and I got a really low roll just to see if there were any there, but he got a really high roll to find them. And I'm like, okay, one guy, he's off duty, he's in plain clothes, he's here to enjoy the festivities like everyone else. And this, in theory, Sealy issue, man, he goes up and he's like, "So, I just saw two guys drag a woman into that alley, and she was screaming and resisting." I'm like, "Okay, give me your charisma check." And he just sold it. And I'm like, "You're going to send this poor mortal into that alley with those two red caps?" And he's like, "Uh huh." And I'm just like, "Okay, sure."
Oh,
And
I know
I'm
how this one
Yes,
ends.
yes, I've told Simon this story. This is my, hey, at least vampires have to make humanity checks story. The Fae are monsters.
I
So,
gave somebody a shame character who was a red cap who ended things very similarly.
yup. So, my troll, super honor bound troll, does the honorable thing. And he's like, "Okay, well, I'm going to go in with him and give him a fighting chance." I'm like, "Cool, you're a big, scary troll man. Maybe." So the Red Caps, and I already knew what they were going to do. The Red Caps were expecting a bunch of changelings to walk in. They did a hit first, pay attention later approach. And because they were expecting three changelings, they needed to drop one right away. I had one of these two Red Caps unleash Dragon's Ire. And who was the person, like, they walked, I asked them, like, "Are you walking in side by side? Or are you in front of the cop?" He's like, "Oh, I think we're side by side." I'm like, "Okay, I'm just going to roll this die here to see which one of you." Oh, look, he hit the cop. As it turns out, mortal cops don't survive very well when hit with an unleashed dragon's ire. Not at all. After the just barrage of suffering and punching and like 3 minute call on the weird for free that you get with a decent unleashing roll, he just dropped in one hit. So then the rest of the changelings rush in. A number of things ensue. They do end up, winning. But at the end, I'm like, "Okay, what are you doing about this police, like this cop corpse? Like, what? This is a problem." The red cap in the group just went, "Eh, there's no murder if there's no body." And I'm like, "Oh, God, you people." And he just walks up to the guy and he's like, "I'm going to start eating him." I'm like, "Are you guys going to hide this?" And they're like, "The mist will take care of it if anyone notices." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And people walk by and they look and they see him like a leg into this guy. And I'm just like, "Okay, these people are all going to go home and they don't know what they saw, but the trauma is real." I just want to say you've gone through. If this were a vampire game, we'd be like seven humanity rolls in. You're all monsters. But the Fae don't give a shit. That was like the moral of my story is the Fae don't give a shit.
Well, yeah, if they inspire nightmares, that's still connecting people to the dreaming.
Right? Exactly. And as long as they go home and have horrible night terrors at night, and feed some glamour to somebody from those night terrors, then everything is a-okay. Oh my god.
And
The
all the
rest of
Castaigne had a happy ending.
well, only kind of. This game was also a lesson for me in Unleashing was not designed for one-shot games. Like I started everyone with Nightmare. Everybody started with Nightmare. They were still like, yeah, sure, let's unleash. Unleashing sounds great. Let's unleash. Because I'm not going to be here in 5 games to care about the pile of Nightmare I'm sitting on. Yeah, Unleashing is not balanced around one shots at all. The rest of the story, in sum up, they continued to investigate, is basically there was an Autumn Balorian She, maybe more, maybe not. That's all they uncovered. And he was arranging for all of the Fae in the North Side gang to collectively rhapsody all of the creative people involved in creating the Uptown Theater. All of the people that built the marble statues, the chandeliers, the architects, you name it. They had juiced all of them collectively with glamour over a period of months, and then had lured or maybe convinced to collaborate a number of fire in anime into gas pipes in the uptown. And this isn't exactly historic, but I set up gas lights because they're so beautiful and because it gave me this great excuse to have the solemnids there. And just the idea that at the last minute they were going to blow the whole theater, do this mass rhapsody that would break the truce that the Fae had been maintaining, which would be terrible for most of the Fae, but it would be really great for the burgeoning Shadow Court and Unseelie that were running the North Side gang that were sick of there being a truce anyway. The rest of Chicago was on the brink of war. Tipping that little nightmare over to completion would have just allowed them to glut themselves for decades. And so that was what they fought to stop. The like 6 success unleashing at the end of the game to get rid of the Solemnids while it worked also wrecked the entire Uptown Theater anyway. It was really messy.
So the Rhapsody succeeded.
Not exactly. I mean, the whole theater wasn't destroyed. They got the Solemnids out of there. The Uptown, well, let's just say the Uptown in that canon will be opening a good 3, 4 months after its actual historic opening date. There's a lot of piping that needs to be relayed. Poor guy, he had 2 levels of Wayfare, and he got 6 successes on his unleashing roll.
Oh, where did he land?
Well, he wasn't throwing himself. He was transporting all the Solemnids from the gas pipes. He just aimed them all up. I'm like, oh well, you got 6 successes, so sure, yeah, they get thrown out of the Uptown Theater, but all the piping's going with them, all of it, and not delicately. So that's going to
Wow,
be a
that
mess, and good luck because there will be many people hunting you for a while.
yeah, that reminds me of New Year's Eve in Detroit.
Oh, okay, that's an invocation.
Oh, every year, kind of after Thanksgiving, the all of the news networks and all of the news programs and all the news radio starts running PSAs to the effect of, remember, if you fire your gun up into the air in the city for New Year's, that bullet comes down in the city.
They needed to remind people of that.
Not every year, but almost every year, there's a report of basically a house getting shelled by shells that were caught in the wind and didn't come straight down.
Yeah, that's tragic. It's very, yes, very similar to that in terrible ways. Terrible, terrible ways.
Hmm.
Also, yay, salamanders. Salamanders. Oh, the many ways that I have seen that particular inanimate kit spelled.
They're one of my favorites.
They're fantastic. They're fantastically capricious and weird and unexpected in ways that even the other inanimate aren't. But we will
Yes, I
definitely get to. This land is your land eventually.
Someday we'll get to the anime episode and I can talk about my headcanon Prometheus tie-in.
We will get there. So, yeah, that's really the Changeling news that I got out of Gen Con. Quick recap of my game for those that are curious, as there was some interest expressed. And we will see you all again on our regular release cycle. I'm not quite sure what the next episode will be at the point that this goes up, but I hope to see some of you maybe at next Gen Con. It was a good time. And thank you to my co host, Simon, for chatting up potential future line options with me.
The music from this conversation was LSD by Montplaisir.